Holcomb, and today I'm going to show you how to EQ your amp. Not necessarily like EQing your amp, like how to make a sound or anything like that, but EQing your amp is in, getting a heavy tone without killing the articulation of your notes. So I will show you how to do that. All I'll be using today is just a Craig GLX 1200H half stack with the matching cab to go with it, and I'm gonna go over how to get a heavy sound without killing your notes and not being oversaturated and being all ballsy, and how to incorporate different size strings into your EQing, and how to EQ extended range guitars like 7 or 8 strings, because they sound completely different when you plug them in too. And so yeah, let's get started. So most guitar players, what they'll usually do to get the most metal or heavy tone, I should say, during a high gain setting, is they'll usually crank their gain way up high. They'll usually turn the shape up, which is usually like your presence or resonance knobs if you have them, to get that like super heavy, like kind of overly distorted tone. And they'll crank their lows and they'll crank their mids, crank their highs, what have you, to get like the perfect awesome tone and all this other shit. When in all actuality, all you're going to do is just oversaturate your tone and kill your tone, and I will demonstrate. So this is the typical like metal tone, so to speak. Pretty killer tone. Sounds so uber fucking heavy like all this other shit. Only problem with this tone is you start hooking it up to a mic, and especially if you have a full range band, with drums and bass and a singer and another guitar player, especially another guitar player with you, you're not going to hear yourself very well. All that gain, all it's doing is just oversaturating the tone and making it extremely thin. And when you make it super thin like that, it's just gonna pretty much just kill you, while the other guitar player is being completely heard. All you're going to be is just background buzz, essentially. So here's what I'm going to do, or how at least I find a good tone to go with that. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to turn that gain way the fuck down. Don't keep it up to 10. Turn it around to like maybe 6, 6.5, somewhere around there. And you're going to want to keep your presence and tone and all that stuff to a real minimal, so that way more of your mids and everything punch out, because all your mids and everything is what makes you punch through more. Now you got the bass drum and everything going on, and the bass drum and the bass guitar, so you really don't need that much lows. So turn those down to a minimum. Keep your mids like pretty high up there, I'd say to like maybe like a 6 or something like that, and kind of use your high to complement your mids to make it more well-rounded out. And then you can kind of go from there. Once you've dialed in your mids, and your highs, you can kind of adjust your lows how you want to. Now with this tone, especially with your gain being around 6 or 7, it might be a tiny bit harder to do pinches and all this other stuff, but if you're a good guitar player, you shouldn't have to worry about doing all that stuff anyhow. So turn your gain down to around 6, 6.5, somewhere around there. Push lots of mids, turn your lows down, and just kind of complement your mids and your lows, or your highs and your lows with your mid, and I'll show you what that does. So now that all that stuff's pretty much taken care of, you're going to find that through a mic, or even just in your own personal bedroom, you're going to have a lot more definition and a lot more clarity with your notes, especially in a high gain shredding type of situation, which I use a lot, and especially you know, doing a whole bunch of metal and rock and roll and shit like that. So I'll show you now what it sounds like once you have all that definition. And even in my own opinion right now, I could turn the lows up a little bit more and probably turn those highs a little bit down. Like I was saying, once you dial in those mids, just try to counterbalance it with the lows and the highs. Yeah, big difference. And so now you're going to get that tone that you want through your mic, and you're still going to get the tone clarity. And because I don't have so much gain, I'm not going to oversaturate the mic, and it's not going to come out all thin. It's going to come out a lot punchier, and it's going to sound fuller. And now that I've turned my presence and my resonance, which is on this amp, my shape, down, it's not going to be all drowned out by everything else by over accentuating the highs and the lows that come out of the cab. And you've got to remember too that mids are probably one of your most important features when especially in playing a live setting. You're going to want a lot of mids because they stand out more in a microphone than anything else. All your highs and mids are going to do, and here I'll even turn the mids off and I'll show you what just a whole bunch of highs and lows just sound like. Turning the lows up. Now I'm turning the highs up. Sounds like a whole bunch. It sounds like really if you just turn the the shape up a little bit and or the presence and resonance knobs on your amps. So I'm putting those back to where they were, and I'm turning my mids back up. And now that I've put it back to where it was, and even on this setting, I'll even show you what the presence and resonance knobs do. So I'm going to turn that shape knob up. See how it makes it sound all thin and kind of quiet a little bit? And it focuses so much on the distortion that you can't really hear hardly anything else. See, right there I think is a really good tone. I have my presence or resonance knob, which is my shape knob, to like 2.5. I got my lows up to like maybe 3 or 4, my mids to 6, and my highs to around 7. And that's a perfect tone for me. I have my gain on that particular channel up to 6 because it's so high gain anyways. And I mean, on different amps, you know, the channels act completely different too. Like my rhythm channel on this thing is a perfect rhythm tone, but in order to get that perfect rhythm tone, I actually had to turn the gain all the way up because it's so low that like I actually had to turn it all the way up. Not really much of a difference, just one has a little bit more of like a shapier tone to it. especially when using different size strings, they're all going to sound completely different too. And I'll show you different guitars of mine that have different gauge strings and how they're going to sound. Like this one has the 10 to 46 set, except I put a 49 on here because it's my drop C guitar. And the different tone, the different gauge strings you use are all going to sound really different too. They're all going to put out a different tone. Like bigger strings tend to sound more woofier than lighter gauge strings. And so you got to take that into account when you start setting up your EQ. And especially when it comes to 7 strings and 8 strings, that same kind of theory works too, because they have so much more wood and have so much lower end. And so I will show you another 6 string that I have that just has a lot bigger strings on it, and how much different it sounds, and how you can get it to really punch out if you just dial in the tone just a little bit based off of those. So this is my V, and it has 11s to 52s on it because I put this one in drop B, and you're going to notice right away because it has EMG pickups where the other one had passive pickups that, for one, this is going to push out a lot more like hot signal and stuff like that, and the strings are going to sound woofier. And by woofier I mean like the same note but like a lower push to it, I suppose, so to speak. So right away what I want to do is I want to take some lows out on this and maybe turn up the highs just a little bit, just to bring out the low and not have it be so focused on the low, because like I said, this is a guitar, it's in treble clef of course. You already have a bass guitar and bass drums and toms and all that shit going on. You don't need to bring out any more lows. You want to be heard, you want to be, you know, full of punch. So, and automatically too, I'm going to want to turn the gain down just a wee bit because of the EMGs. Bring up the highs just a little bit off the mids. Now already you've brought up the kind of tone, I guess, gave it like a warmer sound, so that way you can still have the low woofiness to it without having to necessarily drown it out with all the extra lows and stuff. Now let me bring it back to what it was. Just that slight adjustment makes this thing almost drown out because of it. It's already pushing out so much low frequencies. Although it kind of gives it a good Devin Townsend-y sound in your bedroom, in a live setting it's going to push out a shit ton of lows and you're not going to be able to hear yourself all that well. And so that's with just regular 6 strings, you know, with thicker gauge strings. And I'll show you my Jem, which is in standard, which has really, really tiny strings on it. So this is my Jem, and it has 9 to 42 gauge set of strings. So pretty lightweight, or not lightweight, but light gauge. So they're going to be real trebly. They're going to push out a lot of like the highs and stuff. Real warm tone. So with an amp like this, I would actually turn the lows up on this and maybe turn the highs just a little bit down. Because without it, it's going to sound kind of tinny. Because I have the highs up so much, it sounds kind of tinny, kind of like those old 80 guitar god like Steve Vai and Eddie Van Halen kind of tone, like. And if that's your tone, of course, like, you know, do that. I mean, a lot of it goes by preference too. This is just a good way to get a good live and studio tone that'll rack up really well. And you're gonna find too that with the mic, it automatically adds a shit ton of treble and lows anyways. So I'm gonna turn the highs down just a little bit, keep my mids where they are, turn the lows just a little bit up, and now here we go. Because I turned down the highs maybe like another number or so and turned the lows up another number, I feel that it brings out this guitar's full well-rounded tone, which you can totally achieve by doing that. And now I'll kind of go over extended range guitars like 7 strings and 8 strings and what I would particularly do in a situation like that. So this is my Universe. It's a 7 string, and I am going to show you why you need to EQ 7 string and 6 string guitars so much differently. 7 string guitars just by nature push out a shit ton of lows because it has so much more extra wood in the neck, and you know, they typically build them with woods that more accommodate to bring out that low 7th string, and they try to make it to where it pushes out all those lows because you're playing like a really low guitar. And so in a situation like this, you're going to want to turn down your lows quite a bit because it's already going to be pushing out so much more lows. So turn those lows down like 1, push the highs, and I would actually push the mids just a little bit. And I feel this way that if you do this, you'll actually bring up that low part so you can actually hear it better, so it's not as drowned out. Also doing this too, because it is going to push out a shit ton of lows, your higher strings are going to, you know, be kind of like lower too, and so you want to really accentuate them too. So you want to hear all your strings by bringing up, you know, all the mids and highs and turning down your lows, so you can really accentuate all your notes. My 8 string, and I wanted to bring 8 string guitars into this in particular because they're rather hard to find a good tone for, because unlike a 7 string where, you know, you're trying to not really bring out so much lows, this thing pushes out so much lows, but it'll kind of drown out your high strings all at the same time and make them kind of like, or either that or make them like really tinny if you do it wrong. Right now I'm using the same tone I was using with my 7 string, you know, with my lows around like 2 and my mids and my highs around like 7. And you'll notice it sounds awesome, but still kind of tinny when you're playing like the low stuff. But then when you go up here to the highs, it's super super, super tinny. So the real challenge is how you bring out those lows but tame those highs. And what I'm going to suggest is actually, because it pushes out so much lows, is to push the lows just maybe one notch up to like maybe like 2 or 3. Push the mids to like a lot. Turn down your highs to maybe like 5. And that to me, taking down the highs, I feels like it actually would tame, you know, the really high notes, and bringing up the lows tames all those really high notes. But it doesn't make the low bottom end push of this guitar like necessarily drown out, because you've pushed your mids so much higher. And you know, on a lot of this too, I mean, you got to find out what your personal preferences are, like what you like in a tone, and you know, account for like string gauge, account for the size of the guitar for that matter, you know, and think of the pickups too. A lot of people don't actually think of what kind of pickups are in a guitar. Like in this guitar, they're EMG pickups, so I like to turn my gain down with EMGs because they already push so much gain out that if you turn the gain down, like here, I'll give you an example. I had my gain up to where I had it with passive pickups. You can't really distinguish your notes all that well because it's too saturated. Like I was talking about how you mic it when it has too much gain and it sounds all fuzzy and not necessarily flat but thin. Now you turn down the gain a little bit with EMGs or active pickups. You're able to hear your notes so much better because this is already pushing out so much gain. If you turn down the gain on your amp, you're gonna, you know, make it balance out. So just remember when you're EQing your amp, have a personal preference. Try to push as much mids as you can without killing the tone, because mids can sometimes just kill a tone. I've heard people that use primarily mids and it's just god awful. But if you don't have any mids at all, it's going to sound super thin. If you have too much bass, it's going to sound like you're pushing. It sounds like you're going to have a blanket covering your cabinet. If you have too much highs, it's going to sound super thin and fuzzy. So I try to find a good balance. And for me, on this particular amp, I mean, every amp's a different story too. Especially with tube amps, you know, and it depends on the cab and all this other stuff. You gotta just sit there and play with it for a while. And what I'll usually typically do with my tube amps is a lot different than this, but since I'm using this for the demonstration, I'm just telling you what I did with this. So my lows on this amp, I pretty much like them around like 2 or 3, depending on what guitar I use, because I change EQs for every guitar I use, because I'm picky. And then I'll usually have my mids around 7, and I'll have my highs around 7, 7.5, somewhere around there. I have my gain usually, because I'm always using my Jem and my Universe for the most part. I have my gain around 6.5, and I have the shape, that presence and tone knob or resonance knob, to around like 2, around there. And that for me creates the perfect tone. Now I'm going to show you how quick and easy it can be to dial in a perfect tone in 2 seconds. You're always going to want to keep playing, you know, so you can hear the difference and stuff. And for the most part, you're going to want to play the same stuff so you can actually hear like the tonal difference. And on this video, it probably, my cell phone didn't probably do any justice recording any of this stuff. But I mean, if you have a musician ear, you're going to be able to tell the slight differences, because I mean, every mic picks up, you know, the slightest difference. So I hope you found this useful, and yeah, keep it metal as fuck.